Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to continue our scholarly examination of Wasteland, the great anthology from the late 80s. Today we're looking at 13 through 15. So the artist rotations is still continuing. They still haven't settled on another four-guy lineup like they had the first, 10 to 11 issues, but a lot of interesting artists popping up here and there. So let's look at the first one. Number 13. We got a Tim Truman cover. So Tim Truman did a story, I believe, last issue or the issue before, but he's pretty much just a guest artist. I think that's all he's going to do for Wasteland. So he's definitely not part of the rotating team. But it appears that now Joe Orlando and Donald Simpson are Donald Simpson's still around. Joe Orlando is now part of the team. And Bill Ray, it says guest artist, but he's in a few issues. So he might be one of the new rotating artists. We start off with a Bill Ray drawn story, Tipped Toes, written by John Ostrander and Del Close. This is just a weird story. There's a shoe salesman, and his son turns on this old, X-ray machine. I guess these were popular in shoe stores back in the 40s, where people could put their feet inside and look in the viewfinder and see the bones in their feet, see how they fit the shoes. And they discontinued it whenever they realized that X-rays are harmful. So this guy who owns the shoe store still has one up at his attic, and his son turns the switch on. But then they leave and go home for dinner. After they leave, all of these shoe ghosts, foot ghosts, start spewing out of the machine, walking down the stairs, entering into the city streets. As you can see, it's like a skeletal foot inside various types of shoes. And they're just causing havoc. They're just, people are all shocked. But they're not hurting anyone. They're just freaking everyone out. So at the shoe store owner's house, they come to his house. He figures out what happened. He realizes why this is happening, because the son admits to turning on the machine. The sheriff and them go back to the store. They unplug the machine, but they're still coming out. So they plug up the hole that the shoes are coming out of, hoping that will stop the torrent of spectral feet. But it doesn't work. So it spreads throughout the world. Religion has no answer for it. Philosophy, psychiatry, the government. Nobody has a good a solution or rationale for what's going on. I really like this Bill Ray art, alternating between some characters are kind of realistic, but then some are just total zany cartoon characters. Look at this guy. He's supposed to be like the Stephen Hawking's. And he basically just says, who cares? They're not hurting anyone. Just learn to deal with them. It's going to be part of the world. It's a new part of the world, and that's what happens. People eventually just are like, oh, well, there's some ghost shoes. Let's get on with life. This next story is Don Simpson, and drawn in this weird, really interesting style. It's like a stripped-down Don Simpson, but I don't know, really almost abstract. It's very odd art. So the story starts with this mafia hitman type guy, Rocco. He wakes up one morning and he's got stigmata. If you don't know what stigmata is, it's supposedly every now and then people suffer the same wounds that Christ suffered on the cross. Their palms start bleeding, their feet start bleeding, and then a little cut on their gut starts bleeding. Just like the wounds that Christ had while he was on the cross. This story is called A Stigmata. It's written by John Ostrander solo. And like I said, Don Simpson. Man, look at this crazy, like, I can't think of any cartoonist who ever drew like this. This is just nuts. I kind of like it, though. So he goes to the doctor. The doctor says, I can't help you. You got to see a priest. And the priest is like, thinking to himself, should I tell the bishop? No, he'll steal all the glory for myself. I'm going to alert the media. So this priest is just not the best priest. So it becomes a headline in the newspaper. Pretty soon everyone knows this guy's got stigmata. Newspaper guys, newsmen are hounding him at his house. All these people are following him around. Rocco was forced to take certain measures to ensure his privacy. And we just see him throwing bricks at everyone. Eventually, Rocco was summoned by his godfather, Don Calzone. And he basically says, hey, you've been a good enforcer, good soldier, but I gotta let you go. Your stigmata is bringing too much attention to you and the organization. So I'm sorry, we'll take care of you, but you can't do your job anymore. I don't know if you can see this back here. These people on the street are literally just squiggles. But it's amazing how it does the job. If you look quickly, you're like, oh yeah, there's people on the street. And then you look closer, and it's just a bunch of squiggles. So he's really bummed because Rocco really liked his career. That's all he knew how to do. So one day the Pope comes to visit Rocco. And for some reason he looks like a Muppet. I don't know why. And the Pope says, you know, this is God's way of telling you to give up your old ways, your evil, sinful ways. He says, what, should I become a monk? He says, well, maybe you should. Excuse me. So he joins this monastery. And after a few months, his stigmata clears up. And this monastery is famous for their wine. And they even put him on the label, Fra Rocco White Zinfandel. And they, of course, don't tell anyone that his stigmata is cleared up because they want to keep making lots of money. And they even sell, like, crazy icons and relics of Rocco. And so the moral of the story is this last panel, I love this. All of which goes to prove that while God may work in mysterious ways, the ways of men are stranger. Really neat story. I like that one. Here we have another Doug Close story, assisted by John Ostrander, and visuals by Joe Orlando. Message from the Star Worm. This is a really weird story. So apparently this woman was shot outside of a military base. She had all of these Stephen Queen books in her handbag. Obviously, it's Stephen King. And she was trying to enter the base, so the guard shot her. And when she died, this like weird worm came out of her brain. And we see these two star worms up in space, observing our planet. So obviously they've been concocting this plan for quite a while. Now we see the house of Stephen Queen, and he kind of admits that he's had these voices in his head. It's almost as if I've got a worm in my brain translating ancient signals from the stars that's making me type all this shit. So and now we flash back to, this is the woman who was in the newspaper article. The new Stephen King book comes out. Sorry, Stephen Queen. She freaks out at the bookstore. She's so excited to get a copy. She reads it, and by rearranging the pages, she receives signals. She says the same thing. It's almost as if there's a worm in my head forcing me to sift through all of Stephen Queen to break some kind of code. So it's basically looks like she went schizo. She gets a gun. She goes to the military base, and the guard has no choice but to shoot her. And the worm pops out. And then Stephen Queen's worm pops out. Very odd story. I don't know what to make of it. It's entertaining as hell, though, but it's just very weird. It's like some old science fiction story from like Weird Science, but, you know, way more druggier and weirder. Number 14, we got it covered by Don Simpson. Quick Henry the Flit. And then there's an asterisk. The joke is that it's not Henry's wife. And this giant insect's coming through the window. I don't know if you guys know, this Quick Henry the Flit was a popular ad campaign in the 40s. I think Dr. Seuss drew some of them. And I guess Flit was a popular bug repellent. And it almost became a catchphrase that's kind of forgotten. Quick Henry the Flit. We see in the newspaper, insect fear, panic in the streets. So just an inexplicable, bizarre cover. First story here is Metamorphluzy. And this woman's asking her lover, would you love me if I was something horrible, like a giant caterpillar or slug? And the husband just thinks she's being silly. And she keeps pressing him. So he's like, well, I probably wouldn't. And she's like, I could arrange it so you would. Pheromones, like my perfume. And it turns out she metamorphosizes. She is a slug. And I guess she pumps out the pheromones because Dave is totally still crazy about her. This is one of the weirdest stories that's in Wasteland. This one's insane. And so they make love. And they have candlelit dinners. And they watch movies together. But she's like, I'm going to change soon. I'm going to do my metamorphosis. Will you watch over me? And he's like, of course. So she spins her cocoon. And meanwhile, it looks like he's just become a total wreck. There's just TV dinner boxes on the floor and bottles of booze. She's chain smoking. Just watching the larva. Just waiting for his lover to come back out. Not even collecting the newspapers on the front porch. Keeps calling in sick to work. Finally, it's time. And she comes out of the larva looking like this. And she says, now we have to mate. And with her flick of her tail, she rips off his underwear. And they make love once again. So she has to go. She has to find a suitable receptacle for her eggs. And as he flies off, he says, farewell, my lovely. There's all this yellow liquid here. I don't know if he's dying. I don't know if like a praying mantis, she killed him. Or it just killed him having sex with her. Not quite sure. Oh, man. Did I mention this Bill Ray? This is Bill Ray is a hell of an artist. He can draw really cartoony. He can draw straight. This one's kind of in between. Next story is a John Ostrander solo story. Whistling Past the Graveyard. This is a new artist, Rick Magar. And he might be the newest team member. Because he's in the next issue. So we see these characters from a Chekhov play, doing a famous scene from one of the Chekhov plays. And there's this guy in the audience. And apparently in this play, there's a writer who is just dissatisfied. He's a successful commercial writer, but he's no genius. And this guy who's watching the play, probably for the 50th time, he's like, yeah, I totally know how that guy feels. He's in the same exact boat, this guy. Very successful commercial writer. He lives off of his writing. And he loves writing. But he just knows that he isn't going to be remembered, 10 years after he dies. He's not a great writer. And it just makes him sad and depressed. His ex-wife was always berating him about it. Just saying, like, get over it. You're doing great. So you're not Shakespeare. Big whoop. It's pretty nice. Rick Magyar, I just remember him he used to ink Dennis Cohen on The Question. And I really did not like his inks. I saw his inks at a few other places as well. Never liked him. Apparently, he's not a bad penciler. This is pretty nice. Actually seems like he's the perfect replacement for David Lloyd. Seems like he could draw the stories that David Lloyd used to, the more down-to-earth ones. So this guy has a breakdown, throws his typewriter out the window. And it's all kind of wrapped up in his fear of dying. Because, if you write something good enough or create something good enough, you'll live on after your death. People will remember your works. So he's just like, I never created anything good or great. Nobody's going to remember me after I die. And we see like a little while later, these two writers are looking at the obituaries and they're like, hey, it says here Bill Williamson died. And they're kind of like, yeah, he was pretty good. So I guess this guy's prediction was right. His assessment of his own worth. This one, I'm not sure I understand. It's called The Beast. It's written by both of our writers and art by Michael Davis, who I think is just a guest artist because he's not in the next issue. Michael Davis did a lot of weird stuff for DC, did stuff for Piranha Press. I never liked this guy. It's a lot of flash, but just absolutely no storytelling skills. It's a big mess. I think if this guy just drew a single drawing, if he put some work into it, he could probably draw something pretty nice. You see flashes of, he could probably be a decent illustrator. But his comic pages are just... So the story is kind of weird in the first place. And then his bad storytelling makes it even more opaque. But it's basically this guy wakes up one day and the devil's at the foot of his bed. And he's basically saying, he tells the guy, you contain a monstrous evil and I must seek it out and destroy it. And he's like, what are you talking about? He says, it's in your past. And he says, how are you going to get in my past? And he just rips into his skull and climbs in, takes a journey into his brain. Goes around with a shotgun, killing all these memories he had throughout his life, going backwards in time. I'm not even quite sure why. It's not like there's anything bad he's done. Well, this one is kind of... one of them is, where he's just kind of like coercing a girl to have sex with him. And this one is just whatever. Him talking to a friend in college. Not even sure what's going on in some of these panels. So I don't know if you noticed, but our protagonist in this story, the guy was getting his memories obliterated. He had a little kitten in bed with him. Or not a little kitten, an old cat. And the cat grows into this monstrous shape here and rips apart the demon, or the devil. And basically they fuse the cat, man, and the protagonist. And the cat says, you're going to be different now. You're going to be, expect to become more aggressive. And he calls him Donald. And the protagonist says, I've been a bit of a weenie, I must admit, but no more. I am alive and powerful and hungry. And the camera pulls back from his window in a skyscraper, and it says Trump Tower. So I don't know, this is supposed to be Donald Trump? And how he got to be such a shitheel? But he doesn't look a thing like Trump, even when Trump was younger. I don't know. Probably the worst story I've read so far in Wasteland. I wish it wasn't in there. Badly drawn, badly written, and a dumb idea in the first place. Okay, number 15. I think we've got our stable of artists all finalized. Covered by Bill Ray. This is just these, like, little trailer park. And these freak parents, and their baby's totally normal. Pretty weird cover. So the first story is called Crocophagia, or Hamlet in Egypt. Del Close with John Ostrander. Rick Magyar art. This is pretty odd, this one. So it's like a retelling of Hamlet, and Hamlet's girlfriend Ophelia. In the play, I think this happens, where it's almost like they're arguing about who loves her more, Hamlet, the boyfriend, or this guy, the brother. And the king is just like, well, you know, Hamlet's uncle who killed his father to take over and become the king. He's just like, God, these guys are so stupid. And in their challenge about who loves who more, I believe Hamlet says, I'll eat a crocodile to prove my love for Ophelia. So the king says, what do you guys want? He says, we want a crocodile. We got to settle this once and for all. Hamlet's got to eat it to prove his love. And the king's like, I'm not going to do that. But listen, I'll send you to Egypt, or wherever the hell these crocodiles are from. Knock yourselves out. You're not going to do it here. He says, have you ever seen a crocodile, Hamlet? Hamlet's like, no. So I guess he sends them off to Egypt. It looks like they're on a cruise ship. So basically just like a zany, satirical take on Hamlet. Almost like if SCTV did one of their long-form skits about Hamlet. So these pirates show up and attack the ship. And we see Ophelia. She's dead on the prow. That reminds me, knock, knock. Who's there? Ophelia. Ophelia who? Ophelia your own crotch for a change. That's a Shakespeare knock, knock joke. I heard it in an old National Lampoon album. Write in the comments below if I should never tell a joke again on one of these podcasts and one of these YouTube videos. God, I'm so tempted to tell you another one now. I'll start a new YouTube channel of me just telling jokes poorly. So finally, Hamlet sees a picture of a crocodile. And all of a sudden, he's just like, I don't think I want to eat a crocodile. And he freaks out so hard that the pirates run. They're all scared. They think there's a crocodile on the ship because he's yelling, screaming about crocodiles being 20 feet long. All the pirates abandon ship. So then they head back to Denmark. Very odd story. This is like the kind of story only Del Close would ever think to write. It's just nuts. Here we have 0 Hour, written by the two writers, artist and colorist Joe Orlando. I think I told you guys this already, but I still think it's so cool that after being a hot shit editor higher up in the DC, editorial bullpen, that, Joe was just like, yeah, I'm kind of itchy to draw again, especially for you bunch of weirdos. Probably reminded him of his EC days, getting to do little weird short stories. This was kind of drawn in this cutesy style. And we see this kid, and his dad's making the pumpkin, says, can we go trick-or-treating yet? And the father says, not until 0 Hour. That's when Halloween begins. And the kid doesn't really know what he's talking about. So they go trick-or-treating. And he's like, is this 0 Hour now? It doesn't say so on the clock. And the kid's asking all these weird questions to himself. He's thinking, does nothing count during 0 Hour? Was anything permitted? Is God blind during 0 Hour? And he says, because all of us, even 5-year-olds, must face 0 Hour alone. And then the story takes a really weird flip. And he's thinking to himself, these thoughts I'm having, they're too sophisticated for a 5-year-old. Am I dreaming? I'm not dreaming, I'm remembering. I'm remembering a frozen moment that stretches through all eternity. That's what 0 Hour is. This is just a memory of my childhood. How old is the me doing the remembering? And he looks through his mask. And he sees himself as an old man on his deathbed. And his children are watching him die. And he repeats the thing, because all of us, even old men, must face 0 Hour alone. Really bleak story. I love the Don Simpson art in this one. This is Mother's Withered Hands. And we see this guy who, this could be Del Close, talking to a psychiatrist. And he's talking about his love for comic books as a child. And how he's still this super huge collector. And his mother one day was afflicted with this thing where all of a sudden her hands shriveled up into these little nubs. She had to wear mittens all the time. But it was while he was away at college. And all the collectors he met at college, there was a handful of other guys who were nerds like him. And he said that all of them had to do with mothers who threw their comics away. But his mother never did. And I love this. He kind of gives off this litany of all these great comics, of all the comics he kept since his childhood. Simon Kirby's Boys Ranch, Simon and Kirby's Fighting American, all of Wine and Rights and Swamp Thing, and O'Neill and Kaluta's Shadow. All the other characters are DC, but it does say Shadow, copyright Con Nast. The Macro Boy Captain Marvel Jr.'s, Reed Crandall Blackhawk. Herbie the Fat Wonder. They couldn't draw him, though, because they didn't have the rights. He said that his mom was even phobic about his comics. She never touched them. She'd almost get uncomfortable when she saw them. So he comes to a conclusion. He self-analyzes the situation. He says, I think the universe is the way it is in order to protect my comic book collection. If my mother had thrown out my comic books, I would have been psychotic. And the psychiatrist says, but she didn't. And he says, not in this timeline. But what if in every other timeline my mother did throw out my comics and I couldn't accept it? In every other timeline, she threw the comics out. Only in this timeline did they survive because my mother's hands were withered by a psychic blast of rage from every other possible me. Just as he was reaching to throw out his comics. So the psychiatrist says, that means our entire reality was created when your mom went to destroy your comics. And before she did, there was nothing. So we're just a cautionary tale. And he's like, that's right. So the psychiatrist talks to the viewer, to us. Mothers everywhere, keep your damn hands off the kids' collection of comic books, or whatever they collect. And the young guy says, if I'm right, we'll cease to exist. There's no need for us to be a cautionary tale. And everything goes to black. This is the kind of story that only Wasteland would try to tell. It's so heady and trippy. It's written by Del Close and Josh Ostrander, by the way. And some nice Donald Simpson cartooning. At least in some panels. It's a little inconsistent. And that's it for number 15. So we're trucking along. Sorry about that. We're trucking along. I think next time, well, not next video, but within like, I don't know, a week or so, we're going to wrap this up. Wasteland number 16 through 18. Those are the last 3 issues. And I hope you've been enjoying these so far. I know these last 2 are getting a little, I don't know, the quality's ebbing a little. I still really like these, how bizarro they are. But the stories aren't as, they're not grabbing me as much as the first, 12 issues did. But hopefully we'll see some good stuff. And there's still great stories in here. But just those first 8 to 10 issues, I was just like, every story was blowing me away. And it's nice that they got similarly odd artists. Seems like all the artists in the Wasteland stable are just a little off, a little weird. So that's it. I guess hopefully I'll see you next time here at the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.